morning. Okay, yeah. I'm talking a little bit, at least inferring quantum entanglement, which I'm experiencing right now. Half of me is in California, waking up. So, design never touches the great themes, the fundamental themes of our lives. Design remains at the edge of our life and intervenes only at a certain point in the process, usually when behavior has already been codified, furnishing answers to rigidly stated problems. It then becomes an act of coherence, or a last try at salvation, to concentrate on the redefinition of the primary acts, and to examine, in the first instance, the relationships between design and these acts. And this is a good place to start. The project, Typographic Landscape Ecology, is an ongoing design research project that investigates typographic artifacts in the urban landscape in order to infer how these artifacts serve as evidence for larger semiotic systems. It presupposes that our everyday experience is undergirded by a semiotic landscape, an ecology, a symbolically mediated phenomenon understood only through cognition and representation. A system of signs that forms a coherent holism in which each of the elements is related to each other, where individual signs can be combined into sequences according to certain codes. The system of typographic elements contributes to a kind of gestalt that defines graphic space to its occupants. This is similar to a piece of music, a systemic whole, compromised of individual elements of interrelated sounds, tones, rhythms, and silences, which are also symbolically mediated through human cognition and representation. Typographic Landscape Ecology is an instrumental methodological design research project that develops procedures and conceptual frameworks to test hypotheses. It archives the typographic artifacts that populate the world around us. It maps them and creates supposititious virtual structures as a way to explore the semiotic world we live in. As a theoretical conceptual design research project, it describes some of the underlying semiotic structures that define our world that are not readily apparent. These structures are speculative at best, and more often than not, quite intentionally removed from reality, but not much more so than anything else. They are hypotheses arrived at through attenuated conclusions from equivocal relationships between semblant variables. Typographic Landscape Ecology is an experimental theoretical conceptual research project about design, disguised as an instrumental methodological research design project. It is comfortable in this inconvenient space. It's explaining things as problematic to begin with. Yuri Lotman's beautiful little statement here says something about the hopelessness in being able to explicate the complexities of our world. This is the malady of this project I'm presenting here. Therefore, in order to explain the project and unpack its method, it would help to go through a quick exercise. The submitted title of this paper is Wandering Through a Map of Typographic Landscape Ecology. This is a bit deceiving, as the research project it describes operates in a sequence of metaphoric phases that examine the progressive and regressive scales of the semiotic landscape and mirrors other scalar structures, for example, physics. For example, the submitted title of this paper operates at a metaphoric and metonymic level, but it could easily mutate into other titles that occupy other metaphoric levels. For the sake of clarity and fidelity to the conceptual structure of the research, we will work our way through some potential states of the paper's title. A probable series of titles might start or end here in a non-figurative form, conceptual graphic analogy. Yes, this is right, sorry. Analysis of relational typographies and geosemiotic vectors. This uses the relatively non-figurative terms analyses and vectors to describe the methodologies of the research. The subsequent level could expand with more possible implications of meaning, such as explorations in geosemiotic cartography. In this title, there's a shift from the non-figurative to the metonymic and metaphoric. Non-figurative terms analyses and vectors moves to metonymic cartography. Conceptual analyses moves to a more metaphorical explorations with the implication of journey title then could extend to yet greater metaphoric form, and coincidentally the submitted title, Wandering Through a Map of Typographic Landscape Ecology. Here the word exploration moves to a metaphoric level, a step further from reality, wandering through a map. And assuming that we understand what a map is, one that we hold in our hands, wandering signifies that this is not real, something clearly beyond the possibilities of the normal. We've also moved from the discipline of geosemiotics to a more specific and unique sub-inquiry, typographic landscape ecology, which clarifies the research by defining the previous relational typographies of geosemiotic vectors as simply ecology, which is more complex in its many implications. The natural evolution of this trajectory is to greater reaches of metaphor, for example, getting lost in a chart of quantum typographic topology. Wandering has regrettably led us to getting lost, a greater extreme of metaphorical evolution. From here, we get a bit stuck, as metaphor only allows initial associations, which of course, to some degree, greater complexity, but it does not allow the generation of greater potentials, or better yet, supplements realities. The pseudo-scientific discipline, pataphysics, offers a way out. The science of imaginary solutions, pataphysics is a great leap forward as it positions itself as far outside of metaphysics as metaphysics sits outside metaphysical reality. Similarly, the pataphysical linguistic mechanism of pataphor extends metaphor as far as metaphor extends from non-figurative language. This extension from reality allows the paper's title to evolve into a more rarefied exception of reality beyond the endowment of metaphor to something such as waiting for a rescue team to find you in the wilderness of the liminal interspaces of particle entanglement of mostly bad fonts. Following this logic, to take another step forward, we must push the title to the farthest reaches of its potential figurative evolution. Something such as. So the title of this paper is more probably, at least more judiciously or more exceptionally, the following. Note the insertion of or. So these 5 titles are only a single hypothetical sequence. We could imagine an infinite set of yet more concrete as well as more abstract titles extending from the original title in opposite directions along infinite flights. So goes the title, so goes the research. The linguistic recursive progression, or regression, demonstrated mirrors the processes of the design research project Typographic Landscape Ecologies, as it occupies a progressively figurative and abstract sequence of structures and phases of methods. As a way of introduction to typographic landscape ecologies, we shall start with the equivalent of the non-figurative state. Starting in 2017, the research began a study of a 4-block area in Alameda, California, a small island city in the San Francisco Bay. The process began with the documentation of typographic artifacts within the study area and the addition of quantitative and qualitative metadata. The artifacts were given values based on the following: typographic classifications such as sans serif, serif, script, slab serif, black letter, formality, which is a symbolization and coding relative to observable rules and conventions, typology, or a body of language use, and other factors that form a social language, including street numbers, which are regulatory social language, signage, which is either private or commercial social language, and graffiti, which is a transgressive social language. And then historical placement, material symbolization and coding relative to historical context, as in, does it reference something contemporary or historical in styles and to what degree? The theoretical framework of the semiosphere is used to act as a meta-reality within which we can posit the artifacts in question. The specific metaspace of the 4-block study area is thus framed as a semiotic biosphere, or what Yuri Lodman has described as a semiosphere, an ecology of cultural meaning. Consequently, each artifact is also given a value relative to its position in the semiosphere. The documented and cataloged typographic forms are digitally mapped and visualized, and then analyzed, enabling conjectures based on geospatial groupings and densities, correlations relative to the specifics of their function, aesthetics and cultural codes, patterns revealed linguistic indexes of sociocultural processes and trends surfaced in terms of the dominance of certain letter forms, particular styles and methods of graffiti, certain typefaces with private house numbers, areas of transition, edges and separators, aesthetic code preferences and outliers, larger patterns of cultural forces, subtle structures, and microecologies. These patterns and trends offer clues for critical conjectures around larger social, cultural, and historical forces, such as the ad hoc nature of graffiti, ad hoc even for graffiti, the sporadic punctuation of the neighborhood of house numbers with mid-century modern typefaces, which is in contrast to the classical humanist typefaces predominant in the area. The problem, though, surfaced in this level of practical research was inevitably the challenge of scale. Considering the vast size of the urban spaces, of urban spaces in general, and the vast number of variations of typographic forms within these spaces, the scope of this project should expand indefinitely and infinitely, something akin to cataloging all of the insects in a small forest. Rather than attempting this absurd task, research moves a bit forward in the figurative progression, which I explained previously. Starting from conventional quantitative and qualitative research, it unravels outwards to the only epistemological place possible, the imaginary. By imaginary, I do not mean the fanciful, but rather the furthest reaches of the possible, or rather the potentials which are often just as feasible as the actual. Not fanciful, but simply contrary to most common sense. The project has no other way to go but to use the quantitative and qualitative data from the fieldwork to generate meta-landscapes of semiotic space at a meta level of itself. These meta-landscapes reveal the semiotic structures that lie a layer or two or three beneath our everyday perceptions, and so allow us to see the supplementary states of what we consider concrete reality rendered as conceptual frameworks and theoretical, semispheric, causal sub and superstructures. These virtual landscapes illustrate at macro and micro levels the flow of meaning across geography and time, and demonstrate the cultural forces that have a corollary effect on the artifacts examined. For example, it pictures the progression of typographic forms across historical periods and geographic place, from ancient to classical to modern forms. Manufacturing and distribution flows are given material form to indicate transregional flows of production meaning. Like the example of the mutation the paper's title demonstrated earlier in this paper, the metaphoric mechanism only extends so far and leaves us far short of the infinite potentialities inherent in reality. It becomes mired in the limits of the simple transfer of meaning. If we hope to find a more effective way to model the intricate complexity of the semiotic urban landscape in all its potentialities, we need to drag ourselves past the figurative and the metaphysical and stride yet to another level of abstraction in order to offer all potential scenarios. The georeference and categorized data must be analyzed and comprehended at a level vastly farther from metaphoric and used simply as raw material to be used without prejudicial preference or logic or reality, so as to reveal and disclose unforeseen geosemiotic territories and networks. From here, the project has nowhere to expand but to the pataphysical sciences and into the rarefied practice of patent design research. Just as standard physics extends to quantum physics and concedes other seemingly impossible behaviors to occur, taking design research into pataphysics, we can extend our conceptual framing to the outer limits of potentiality, the horde of exceptions possible within the semiotic urban landscapes. A practice of patent design research enables us to find connections between seemingly disconnected particles within the typographic semiotics considered. This is really not as outlandish as it sounds, probably. And its methods, at least here, are not so perplexing. Since landscapes are systems of codes, they, like any code, can be hacked and reformed by reconfiguring their sequences and codes. This kind of hacking is like a DJ that remixes by suturing and layering fractured bits of song and sound. Through a montage, she constructs new associations and translations of signs and codes into new contexts and forms. Like the DJ, using geolocated inventories of typographic artifacts in the urban landscape, the research remixes data and images, creating virtual potential landscapes in the forms of maps of typographic semiomes. These hatch representations of possible landscapes which exist but have not yet been realized. They are neither speculative nor fiction. They are representations of potentialities of the hidden other real. Mackenzie Ward describes it as a portion of the surplus of possibility expressed in what is actual, the surplus of the virtual. The project reveals latent liminal projective, semispheric, ecological megastructures, made visible through various filters that reveal the invisible yet ever-present time-space structures that generate various geosemiotic elements. For example, hovering above the research area is a semi-spheric particle tunnel, rising kilometers into the sky, projecting to and from the quotidian artifacts in the prescribed typographic semiome. The projection is segmented into sequences of indexable determinations, each comprised of specific catalytic modifiers in the creation of the semiome in question. I believe this is actually the video of what I'm speaking about right now. This speculative composition of semiotic space is nothing more than the researcher's entry point into a still larger typographic time-space structure and framework networked with greater interrelations and entanglements with other typographic artifacts across space and time. In conclusion, since the construction of new knowledge is the ultimate goal of research, even subjective and illegitimate conclusions have value by revealing the staggering and stupefying potentialities of reality. Thank you.
Anyone like to ask a question?
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. Wow. This is very interesting. I might maybe be simplifying a little bit the discourse by my questions, and I'm sorry for that, but I wonder what you make of already existing urban typographic inventories. Where do you place them in this kind of conceptualization? Such as, I don't know, Ed Fella's Polaroids of street signs somewhere in the US.
Yeah.
That was my first question.
Okay.
Can I first follow up with the second one?
Yes.
I wonder if you attended all to issues of language of the written work that exists in the urban environment, which might challenge the classical formal categorizations of typography. And just a last little question about what font did you use and why? Sorry, I'm going to play graphic designer here.
That font? Are you talking about this one? Yeah. Oh yeah, that's Jean-Luc, and it's based on the titles from Godard's Masculine and Feminine. Favorite film, favorite font. Yeah. Okay, let me go backwards. Well, actually, let me start with Ed Fella. So yeah, other inventories. I mean, Ed Fella is interested in, if people are unfamiliar with his work, he's a graphic designer at CalArts, and he is interested in vernacular typography, and particularly the sort of the most eccentric and idiosyncratic of it. This is different in that I'm attempting at sort of these primary, these practical levels in the research and field work is to really develop as inclusive as I can inventory of a specific area. So I'm not leaving anything out. In the case in Alameda, I was looking at specific. I mean, I sort of had to tone it down. I had to look for specific things, but I've done some work in Detroit. We did a one-block area, and in one block, I don't know, we had like 800 photographs. So, when you include graffiti and things like band stickers and all this, ephemera that's in there, as well as the official signage and regulatory signage. So I'm trying to be methodological in this phase of it, and in order to allow at that level the data to reveal patterns, as to what is happening in that area. I mean, one of the things that's happened from some of the research in different places is that there are conjectures that you can make, and the work in Detroit really showed, I thought quite clearly, that there were systems of gentrification happening in certain neighborhoods, and that gentrification is happening based on certain types of visual language that were predominant in different areas. And you could see it, these predominance of certain types of commercial language, and then there was, sort of more transgressive, these transitional areas, but then you could find at a different level of transition, typographic choices being made in commercial signage that, reflected a certain type of contemporary style or zeitgeist, and then, right, sort of explained what social processes were happening at that time. So those are two. There was a third, and I've forgotten what we were.
Was that language and the formal classification of type?
talked about.
Yeah, so I'm selecting, frameworks, sort of existing geosemiotic frameworks with the work of Scullin and Scullin. And they've sort of defined the areas, or probably the leaders in this area of geosemiotics. So they are sort of describing certain characteristics, values, and typologies to graphic artifacts in the landscape. So I'm just using that as a framework.
Question? I have two questions that are more in terms of better understanding some parts of your presentation. The first one is because you talk a lot, the semantic comes back often on your slides, and I was wondering what's your reading on the different fonts that you see that you inventory within the city. They all say something, and so I'm wondering if there would be some kind of as if there's knowledge or there are messages sent to us within the city that we might not be aware of through typography. I mean, if we see a word, we read it. Like, as soon as you know how to read, you cannot not read a word you see. But do you think that the type that is being used might also provide a meaning that we might be unaware of? You were just talking about gentrification, how the signs the typography starts to change. If there's something through type that is really giving us a sense of what it is that we're seeing, more so perhaps than the word that we're reading.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, always. There is no neutral font, there is no font without meaning, there's no image without meaning, right? And some underlying meaning. And part of what I get into this sort of very crazy conceptual stuff is actually about trying to visualize these semiotic superstructures of cultural meaning. And so not in this video, but in the video in the exhibition, I make a very sort of hand-handed attempt to show how these street numbers, house numbers in this neighborhood are then connected to, I take one sort of line, right? Because I keep talking about an ecology, right? So it's very complex, right? And context and time and the context and associations of the viewer itself all come into play. So in the video and the work, I try to create these structures and try to explain how we got from this street number that looks like this, where it started. And I try to go back to Phoenician handwriting and find that link of the way it progresses as a form through history to the present. Now, there's all these other cultural catalysts that come into play over time that can inform that. So yes, graphic designers and all graphic designers are a little obsessed with typography. It's our thing. And so to quote a famous type designer, Tobias Jones, actually from the film Inventaires, if you've seen it, he says, my wife says, do you remember that little restaurant down this corner from there? And he goes, oh yeah, the place next to the place that has the sign really badly curved. Yeah, right, so we're always looking at, last time we went to this pub in Saint Denis, and I forget what it was called, but it was not in pub font. It was in like, I forget, designed by Herman Zapf. It's very elegant and beautiful. It's not, right? It's disconnected. Yes, we're constantly being informed, and I believe that happens at a subliminal level as well. Someone like myself who's hyper-conscious of that will start to obsess about the details, but I think anyone will have that. But then again, context is everything. So Scullin actually talked about this in typography in Hong Kong, where, so it's interesting. Let me do this another way. In New York, there's a lot of businesses that are opening up in Chinatown that are not Chinese. but the businesses are trying to sort of contextualize themselves within Chinatown, so they're putting in signs that are in Chinese characters, but they're choosing the equivalent of Helvetica for the Chinese characters instead of the old style, which might be the same equivalent of Times New Roman, like serif font, or classical. That's a real sort of cultural faux pas, because the sans serif one is actually attributed to the communist regime and part of the Cultural Revolution. And so, there's all these contextual aspects. So I'm fascinated in that very complex ecology. And I talk about semantics because I'm always framing it in that. And Yuri Lotman's theory of the semisphere is a big part of that, which is making that parallel to something like the biosphere, its complexity and its interdependence.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
Joshua.